Donald Cobain was an American musician who was the founder, lead vocalist, guitarist, and primary songwriter of the rock band Nirvana. Through his angst-fueled songwriting and anti-establishment persona, Cobain's compositions widened the thematic conventions of mainstream rock. He was heralded as a spokesman of Generation X, and is highly recognized as one of the most influential alternative rock musicians. Cobain formed Nirvana with Krist Novoselic and Burckhard in 1987, and established it as part of the Seattle music scene that later became known as grunge. After signing with DGC Records, Nirvana found commercial success with the single Smells Like Teen Spirit from their critically acclaimed second album Nevermind, 1991. Although Cobain was hailed as the voice of his generation following Nirvana's sudden success, he resented this, believing his message and artistic vision had been misinterpreted by the public. In addition to Smells Like Teen Spirit, Cobain wrote many other hit songs for Nirvana, including Come As You Are, Lithium, In Bloom, Something in the Way, Heart-Shaped Box, All Apologies, About a Girl, Aneurysm, and You Know You're Right, among others. During the last years of his life, Cobain struggled with a heroin addiction and chronic health problems such as depression. He also struggled with the personal and professional pressures of fame, and he had a tumultuous relationship with his wife, fellow musician Courtney Love. In March 1994, Cobain overdosed on a combination of champagne and Rohypnol, and he subsequently entered an intervention and underwent a detox program. On April 8, 1994, Cobain was found dead in his Seattle home at the age of 27. Police concluded he had died on April 5 from a self-inflicted shotgun wound to the head. Cobain was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, alongside with the rest of the Nirvana members bassist Krist Novoselic and drummer Dave Grohl, in their first year of eligibility in 2014. Rolling Stone included Cobain in its lists of the 100 greatest songwriters of all time, 100 greatest guitarists, and 100 greatest singers of all time. He was ranked 7th by MTV in the 22 greatest voices in music. In 2006, he was placed 20th by Hit Parader on their list of the 100 greatest metal singers of all time. Cobain was born at Grays Harbor Hospital in Aberdeen, Washington, on February 20, 1967, the son of waitress Wendy Elizabeth, née Friedenberg, born 1948, and automotive mechanic Donald Leland Cobain, born 1946. His parents married on July 31, 1965, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He had Dutch, English, French, German, Irish, and Scottish ancestry. His Irish ancestors emigrated from Carrickmore, County Tyrone, Ireland, in 1875. Researchers found that they were shoemakers, originally surnamed Cobain, who came from Innishoteeve, a townland within Carrickmore. They first settled in Canada, where they lived in Cornwall, Ontario, before moving to Washington. Cobain mistakenly believed that his Irish ancestors came from County Cork. His younger sister, Kimberly, was born on April 24, 1970. Cobain's family had a musical background. His maternal uncle, Chuck Friedenberg, played in a band called the Beachcombers. His aunt, Mari Earle, played guitar and performed in bands throughout Grays Harbor County, and his great-uncle, Delbert, had a career as an Irish tenor, making an appearance in the 1930 film King of Jazz. Kurt was described as a happy and excitable child, who also exhibited sensitivity and care. His talent as an artist was evident from an early age, as he would draw his favorite characters from films and cartoons, such as the creature from the Black Lagoon and Donald Duck, in his bedroom. He was encouraged by his grandmother, Iris Cobain, a professional artist. Cobain developed an interest in music at a young age. According to his Aunt Mari, he began singing at the age of 2. At age 4, he started playing the piano and singing, writing a song about a trip to a park. He listened to artists including Electric Light Orchestra, ELO, and, from a young age, would sing songs including Arlo Guthrie's Motorcycle Song, The Beatles' Hey Jude, Terry Jack's Seasons in the Sun, and the theme song to the Monkees television show. When Cobain was 9 years old, his parents divorced. He later said the divorce had a profound effect on his life, and his mother noted that his personality changed dramatically. Cobain became defiant and withdrawn. In a 1993 interview, he said he felt ashamed of his parents as a child, and had desperately wanted to have a typical family. I wanted that security, so I resented my parents for quite a few years because of that. Cobain's parents found new partners after the divorce. Although his father had promised not to remarry, He married Jenny Westby, to Kurt's dismay. Cobain, his father, Westby, and her 2 children, Mindy and James, moved into a new household. Cobain liked Westby at first, as she gave him the maternal attention he desired. In January 1979, Westby gave birth to a boy, Chad Cobain. This new family, which Cobain insisted was not his real one, was in stark contrast to the attention Cobain was used to receiving as an only boy, and he became resentful of his stepmother. Cobain's mother dated a man who was abusive. Cobain witnessed the domestic violence inflicted upon her, with one incident resulting in her being hospitalized with a broken arm. Wendy refused to press charges, remaining committed to the relationship. Cobain behaved insolently toward adults during this period, and began bullying another boy at school. His father and Westby took him to a therapist, who concluded that he would benefit from a single-family environment. Both sides of the family unsuccessfully attempted to reunite his parents. On June 28, 1979, Cobain's mother granted full custody to his father. Cobain's teenage rebellion quickly became overwhelming for his father, who placed him in the care of family and friends. While living with the born-again Christian family of his friend Jesse Reed, Cobain became a devout Christian, and regularly attended church services. He later renounced Christianity, engaging in what was described as anti-God rants. The song Lithium is about his experience while living with the Reed family. Religion remained an important part of his personal life and beliefs. Although uninterested in sports, Cobain was enrolled in a junior high school wrestling team at the insistence of his father. He was a skilled wrestler, but despised the experience. Because of the ridicule he endured from his teammates and coach, he allowed himself to be pinned in an attempt to sadden his father. Later, his father enlisted him in a Little League baseball team, where Cobain would intentionally strike out to avoid playing. Cobain befriended a gay student at school, and was bullied by peers, who concluded that he was gay. In an interview, he said that he liked being associated with a gay identity because he did not like people, and when they thought he was gay they left him alone. He said, "I started being really proud of the fact that I was gay even though I wasn't." His friend tried to kiss him, and Cobain backed away, explaining to his friend that he was not gay, but remained friends with him. According to Cobain, he used to spray paint "God is gay" on pickup trucks in the Aberdeen area. Police records show that Cobain was arrested for spray painting the phrase "ain't got no how whatchamacallit" on vehicles. Cobain often drew during classes. He would draw objects, including those associated with the human anatomy. When given a caricature assignment for an art course, Cobain drew Michael Jackson, but was told by the teacher that the image was inappropriate for a school hallway. He then drew an image of then-President Ronald Reagan that was seen as unflattering. Through art and electronics classes, Cobain met Roger Buzz Osborne, singer and guitarist of the Melvins, who became his friend, and introduced him to punk rock and hardcore music. As attested to by several of Cobain's classmates and family members, the first concert he attended was Sammy Hagar and Quarterflash, held at the Seattle Center Coliseum in 1983. Cobain, however, claimed that the first live show he attended was the Melvins, when they played a free concert outside the Thriftway supermarket where Osborne worked. Cobain wrote in his journals of this experience, as well as in interviews, singling out the impact it had on him. As a teenager living in Montesano, Washington, Cobain eventually found escape through the thriving Pacific Northwest punk scene, going to punk rock shows in Seattle. During his second year in high school, Cobain began living with his mother in Aberdeen. 2 weeks prior to graduation, he dropped out of Aberdeen High School upon realizing that he did not have enough credits to graduate. His mother gave him a choice: find employment or leave. After 1 week, Cobain found his clothes and other belongings packed away in boxes. Feeling banished, Cobain stayed with friends, occasionally sneaking back into his mother's basement. Cobain also claimed that, during periods of homelessness, he lived under a bridge over the Wishkah River, an experience that inspired the song Something in the Way. His future bandmate Krist Novoselic later said, "He hung out there, but you couldn't live on those muddy banks, with the tides coming up and down." That was his own revisionism. In late 1986, Cobain moved into an apartment, paying his rent by working at the Polynesian Resort, a themed resort on the Pacific coast at Ocean Shores, Washington, approximately 20 miles, 32 kilometers, west of Aberdeen. During this period, he traveled frequently to Olympia, Washington, to go to rock concerts. During his visits to Olympia, Cobain formed a relationship with Tracy Marander. Their relationship was close, but strained by financial problems, and Cobain's absence when touring. Miranda supported the couple by working at the cafeteria of the Boeing plant in Auburn, Washington, often stealing food. Cobain spent most of his time sleeping into the late evening, watching television, and concentrating on art projects. Miranda's insistence that he get a job caused arguments that influenced Cobain to write the song About a Girl, which appeared on the Nirvana album Bleach. Miranda is credited with having taken the cover photo for the album. She did not become aware that Cobain wrote about a girl about her until years after his death. Soon after his separation from Miranda, Cobain began dating Toby Vale, an influential punk zinester of the Riot Girl band Bikini Kill who embraced the DIY ethos. After meeting Vale, Cobain vomited, overwhelmed with anxiety caused by his infatuation with her. This event inspired the lyric "Love You So Much It Makes Me Sick" in the song Aneurysm. While Cobain regarded Vale as his female counterpart, his relationship with her waned. He desired the maternal comfort of a traditional relationship, which Vale regarded as sexist within a countercultural punk rock community. Vale's lovers were described by her friend Alice Wheeler as fashion accessories. Cobain wrote many of his songs about Vale. On his 14th birthday on February 20, 1981, Cobain's uncle offered him either a bike or a used guitar. Kurt chose the guitar. Soon, he was trying to play Led Zeppelin's song Stairway to Heaven. He also learned how to play Louie Louie, Queen's Another One Bites the Dust, and The Car's My Best Friend's Girl, before he began working on his own songs. Cobain played left-handed, despite being forced to write right-handed. In early 1985, Cobain formed Fecal Matter after he had dropped out of Aberdeen High School. One of several joke bands that arose from the circle of friends associated with the Melvins, it initially featured Cobain singing and playing guitar, Melvins drummer Dale Crover playing bass, and Greg Hokanson playing drums. They spent several months rehearsing original material and covers, including songs by the Ramones, Led Zeppelin, and Jimi Hendrix. Fecal Matter disbanded in 1986, while the Melvins supported their debut EP, 6 songs. During high school, Cobain rarely found anyone with whom he could play music. While hanging out at the Melvins' practice space, he met Krist Novoselic, a fellow devotee of punk rock. Novoselic's mother owned a hair salon, and the pair occasionally practiced in the upstairs room of the salon. A few years later, Cobain tried to convince Novoselic to form a band with him by lending him a copy of a home demo recorded by Fecal Matter. After months of asking, Novoselic agreed to join Cobain, forming the beginnings of Nirvana. Religion appeared to remain a significant muse to Cobain during this time, as he often used Christian imagery in his work, and developed an interest in Jainism and Buddhist philosophy. The band name Nirvana was taken from the Buddhist concept, which Cobain described as freedom from pain, suffering, and the external world, a concept that he aligned with the punk rock ethos and ideology. Cobain became disenchanted after early touring because of the band's inability to draw substantial crowds, and the difficulty in supporting themselves financially. During their first few years playing together, Novoselic and Cobain were hosts to a succession of drummers. Eventually, the band settled on Chad Channing, with whom Nirvana recorded the album Bleach, released on Sub Pop Records in 1989. Cobain, however, became dissatisfied with Channing's style, and subsequently fired him. He and Novoselic eventually hired Dave Grohl to replace Channing. Grohl helped the band record their 1991 major label debut, Nevermind. With Nevermind's lead single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana quickly entered the mainstream, popularizing a subgenre of alternative rock called grunge. Since their debut, Nirvana has sold over 28 million albums in the United States alone, and over 75 million worldwide. The success of Nevermind provided numerous Seattle bands, such as Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, access to wider audiences. As a result, alternative rock became a dominant genre on radio and music television in the US during the first half of the 1990s. Nirvana was considered the flagship band of Generation X, and Cobain found himself reluctantly anointed by the media as the generation's spokesman. He resented this characterization, since he believed his artistic message had been misinterpreted by the public. Cobain struggled to reconcile the massive success of Nirvana with his underground roots and vision. He also felt persecuted by the media, comparing himself to Francis Farmer, whom he named a song after. He began to harbor resentment against people who claimed to be fans of the band, yet refused to acknowledge, or misinterpreted, the band's social and political views. A vocal opponent of sexism, racism, sexual assault, and homophobia, he was publicly proud that Nirvana had played at a gay rights benefit concert that was held to oppose Oregon's 1992 ballot Measure 9, which would have directed Oregon schools to teach that homosexuality was abnormal, wrong, unnatural, and perverse. Cobain was a vocal supporter of the pro-choice movement, and Nirvana was involved in L7's Rock for Choice campaign. He received death threats from a small number of anti-abortion activists for participating in the pro-choice campaign, with one activist threatening to shoot Cobain as soon as he stepped on a stage. In 1989, members of Nirvana, and fellow American alternative rock band Screaming Trees formed a side project known as The Jury. The band featured Cobain on vocals and guitar, Mark Lanegan on vocals, Krist Novoselic on bass, and Mark Pickerel on drums. Over 2 days of recording sessions, on August 20th and 28, 1989, the band recorded 4 songs also performed by Lead Belly: Where Did You Sleep Last Night?, an instrumental version of Grey Goose, Ain't It a Shame, and They Hung Him on a Cross, the latter of which featured Cobain performing solo. Cobain was inspired to record the songs after receiving a copy of Lead Belly's last sessions from friend Slim Moon. After hearing it, he felt a connection to Lead Belly's almost physical expressions of longing and desire. In 1990, Cobain and his girlfriend, Toby Vale of the Riot Girl band Bikini Kill, collaborated on a musical project called Bathtub Is Real, in which they both sang and played guitar and drums. They recorded their songs on a 4-track tape machine that belonged to Vale's father. In Everett True's 2009 book Nirvana, the biography, Vale is quoted as saying that Cobain would play the songs he was writing, I would play the songs I was writing, and we'd record them on my dad's 4-track. Sometimes I'd sing on the songs he was writing, and play drums on them. He was really into the fact that I was creative, and into music. I don't think he'd ever played music with a girl before. He was super inspiring, and fun to play with. The musician Slim Moon described their sound as like the minimal quiet pop songs that Olympia is known for. Both of them sang, it was really good. In 1992, Cobain contacted William S. Burroughs about a possible collaboration. Burroughs responded by sending him a recording of the Junkies' Christmas, which he recorded in his studio in Lawrence, Kansas. 2 months later at a studio in Seattle, Cobain added guitar backing based on Silent Night, and to Anacreon in Heaven. The two would meet shortly later in Lawrence, Kansas, and produce The Priest They Called Him, a spoken-word version of the Junkies' Christmas. The Beatles were an early, and lasting influence on Cobain. His Aunt Mari remembers him singing Hey Jude at the age of 2. My aunts would give me Beatles records, Cobain told John Savage in 1993, so for the most part, I listened to the Beatles as a child, and if I was lucky, I'd be able to buy a single. Cobain expressed a particular fondness for John Lennon, whom he called his idol in his posthumously released journals, and he said that he wrote the song about a girl, from Nirvana's 1989 debut album Bleach, after spending 3 hours listening to Meet the Beatles. Cobain was also a fan of 1970s hard rock and heavy metal bands, including Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, Aerosmith, Queen, and Kiss. Nirvana occasionally played cover songs by these bands, including Led Zeppelin's Heartbreaker, Moby Dick, and Immigrant Song, Black Sabbath's Hand of Doom, and Kiss Do You Love Me? And wrote the incesticide song Aero Zeppelin as a tribute to Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith. Recollecting touring with his band, Cobain stated, I used to take a nap in the van and listen to Queen over and over again, and drain the battery on the van. We'd be stuck with a dead battery because I'd listened to Queen too much. He was introduced to punk rock and hardcore music by his Aberdeen classmate Buzz Osborne, lead singer and guitarist of the Melvins, who taught Cobain about punk by loaning him records and old copies of the Detroit-based magazine Cream. Punk rock proved to be a profound influence on a teenaged Cobain's attitude and artistic style. His first punk rock album was Sandinista by The Clash, but he became a bigger fan of fellow 1970s British punk band the Sex Pistols, describing them as 1,000,000 times more important than The Clash in his journals. He quickly discovered contemporary American hardcore bands like Black Flag, Bad Brains, Millions of Dead Cops, and Flipper. The Melvins themselves were a major early musical influence on Cobain. His admiration for them led him to drive their van on tour, and help them to carry their equipment. He and Novoselic watched hundreds of Melvins rehearsals, and learned almost everything from them, as stated by Cobain. The Melvins' heavy, grungy sound was mimicked by Nirvana on many songs from Bleach. In an early interview given by Nirvana, Cobain stated that their biggest fear was to be perceived as a Melvins ripoff. After their commercial success, the members of Nirvana would constantly talk about the Melvins' importance to them in the press. Cobain was also a fan of proto-punk acts like the Stooges, whose 1973 album Raw Power he listed as his favorite of all time in his journals, and the Velvet Underground, whose 1968 song Here She Comes Now the band covered both live and in the studio. The 1980s American alternative rock band Pixies were instrumental in helping an adult Cobain develop his own songwriting style. In a 1992 interview with Melody Maker, Cobain said that hearing their 1988 debut album, Surfer Rosa, convinced him to abandon his more Black Flag-influenced songwriting in favor of the Iggy Pop/Aerosmith type songwriting that appeared on Nevermind. In a 1993 interview with Rolling Stone, he said that Smells Like Teen Spirit was his attempt at trying to rip off the Pixies. I have to admit it. When I heard the Pixies for the first time, I connected with that band so heavily that I should have been in that band. Or at least a Pixies cover band. We used their sense of dynamics, being soft, and quiet, and then loud, and hard. Cobain's appreciation of early alternative rock bands also extended to Sonic Youth, and REM, both of which the members of Nirvana befriended, and looked up to for advice. It was under recommendation from Sonic Youth's Kim Gordon that Nirvana signed to DGC in 1990, and both bands did a 2-week tour of Europe in the summer of 1991, as documented in the 1992 documentary, 1991, The Year Punk Broke. In 1993, Cobain said of REM, "If I could write just a couple of songs as good as what they've written. I don't know how that band does what they do. God, they're the greatest. They've dealt with their success like saints, and they keep delivering great music." After attaining mainstream success, Cobain became a devoted champion of lesser-known indie bands, covering songs by the Vaselines, Meat Puppets, Wipers, and Fang on stage, and/or in the studio, wearing Daniel Johnston t-shirts during photo shoots, having the K Records logo tattooed on his forearm, and enlisting bands like Butthole Surfers, Sean and Knife, Chokebore, and Half Japanese along for the In Utero tour in late 1993, and early 1994. Cobain even invited his favorite musicians to perform with him. Ex-Germs guitarist Pat Smear joined the band in 1993, and the Meat Puppets appeared on stage during Nirvana's 1993 MTV Unplugged appearance to perform 3 songs from their second album, Meat Puppets 2. Nirvana's Unplugged set includes renditions of The Man Who Sold the World, by David Bowie, and the American folk song, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, as adapted by Leadbelly. Cobain introduced the latter by calling Leadbelly his favorite performer, and in a 1993 interview revealed he had been introduced to him from reading the American author William S. Burroughs, saying, "I remember Burroughs saying in an interview, these new rock and roll kids should just throw away their guitars and listen to something with real soul, like Leadbelly. I'd never heard about Leadbelly before, so I bought a couple of records, and now he turns out to be my absolute favorite of all time in music. I absolutely love it more than any rock and roll I ever heard." The album MTV Unplugged in New York was released posthumously in 1994. It has drawn comparisons to REM's 1992 release, Automatic for the People. In 1993, Cobain had predicted that the next Nirvana album would be pretty ethereal, acoustic, like REM's last album. Yeah, he talked a lot about what direction he was heading in, Cobain's friend, REM's lead singer Michael Stipe, told Newsweek in 1994. "I mean, I know what the next Nirvana recording was going to sound like. It was going to be very quiet, and acoustic, with lots of stringed instruments. It was going to be an amazing fucking record, and I'm a little bit angry at him for killing himself. He and I were going to record a trial run of the album, a demo tape. It was all set up. He had a plane ticket. He had a car picking him up. And at the last minute he called, and said, I can't come." Stipe was chosen as the godfather of Cobain's, and Courtney Love's daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. According to Grohl, Cobain believed that music comes first, and lyrics second. He focused primarily on the melodies. He complained when fans, and rock journalists attempted to decipher his singing, and extract meaning from his lyrics, writing, "Why in the hell do journalists insist on coming up with a second-rate Freudian evaluation of my lyrics, when 90% of the time they've transcribed them incorrectly?" Though Cobain insisted on the subjectivity and unimportance of his lyrics, he labored and procrastinated in writing them, often changing the content and order of lyrics during performances. Cobain would describe his own lyrics as a big pile of contradictions. They're split down the middle between very sincere opinions that I have, and sarcastic opinions, and feelings that I have, and sarcastic, and hopeful, humorous rebuttals toward cliché bohemian ideals that have been exhausted for years. Cobain originally wanted Nevermind to be divided into two sides, a boy's side, for the songs written about the experiences of his early life and childhood, and a girl's side, for the songs written about his dysfunctional relationship with Vale. Charles R. Krist wrote, in the 4 months following their breakup, Kurt would write a half-dozen of his most memorable songs, all of them about Toby Vale. Though Cobain wrote Lithium before meeting Vale, he wrote the lyrics to reference her. Cobain said in an interview with Musician that some of my very personal experiences, like breaking up with girlfriends, and having bad relationships, feeling that death void that the person in the song is feeling. Very lonely, sick. While Cobain regarded In Utero as for the most part very impersonal, its lyrics deal with his parents' divorce, his newfound fame, and the public image and perception of himself, and Courtney Love on Serve the Servants, with his enamored relationship with Love conveyed through lyrical themes of pregnancy, and the female anatomy on Heart-Shaped Box. Cobain wrote Rape Me as an objective discussion of rape. He wrote about fame, drug addiction, and abortion on Pennyroyalty, as well as women's rights, and the life of Seattle-born farmer on Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle. Cobain was affected enough to write Polly from Nevermind after reading a newspaper story of an incident in 1987, when a 14-year-old girl was kidnapped after attending a punk rock show, then raped and tortured with a blowtorch. She escaped after gaining the trust of her captor Gerald Friend through flirting with him. After seeing Nirvana perform, Bob Dylan cited Polly as the best of Nirvana's songs, and said of Cobain, "The kid has heart." Patrick Susskind's novel Perfume, the story of a murderer, inspired Cobain to write the song Scentless Apprentice from In Utero. The book is a historical horror novel about a perfumer's apprentice born with no body odor of his own but with a highly developed sense of smell, and who attempts to create the ultimate perfume by killing virginal women and taking their scent. Cobain immersed himself in artistic projects throughout his life, as much so as he did in songwriting. The sentiments of his artwork follow the same subjects of his lyrics, often expressed through a dark and macabre sense of humor. Noted were his fascination with physiology, his own rare medical conditions, and the human anatomy. According to Novoselic, Kurt said that he never liked literal things. He liked cryptic things. He would cut out pictures of meat from grocery store flyers, then paste these orchids on them. And all this stuff on In Utero, about the body, there was something about anatomy. He really liked that. You look at his art, there are these people, and they're all weird, like mutants. And dolls, creepy dolls. Often unable to afford artistic resources, Cobain improvised with materials, painting on board games, and album sleeves, and painting with an array of substances, including his own bodily fluids. The artwork seen in his journals later drew acclaim. Many of Cobain's paintings, collages, and sculptures appeared in the artwork of Nirvana's albums, such as the covers of Incesticide and In Utero. His concepts featured in Nirvana's music videos, sometimes leading to arguments with the video producers. Cobain contributed backing guitar for a spoken word recording of beat poet William S. Burroughs entitled The Priest They Called Him. Cobain regarded Burroughs as a hero. During Nirvana's European tour, Cobain kept a copy of Burroughs' Naked Lunch, purchased from a London bookstall. Cobain met with Burroughs at his home in Lawrence, Kansas in October 1993. Burroughs expressed no surprise at Cobain's death. It wasn't an act of will for Kurt to kill himself. As far as I was concerned, he was dead already. There are differing accounts of exactly when and how Kurt Cobain first met Courtney Love. In his 1993 authorized biography of Nirvana, Michael Azerrad cites a January 21, 1989, Dharma Bum's gig in Portland where Nirvana played as support, while the Charles R. Krist 2001 Cobain biography has Love and Cobain meeting at the same Satyricon nightclub venue in Portland but a different Nirvana show, January 12, 1990, when both still led ardent underground rock bands. Love made advances soon after they met, but Cobain was evasive. Early in their interactions, Cobain broke off dates, and ignored Love's advances because he was unsure if he wanted a relationship. Cobain noted, "I was determined to be a bachelor for a few months, but I knew that I liked Courtney so much right away that it was a really hard struggle to stay away from her for so many months." Everett True, who was an associate of both Cobain and Love, disputes those versions of events in his 2006 book, claiming that he himself introduced the couple on May 17, 1991. Cobain was already aware of Love through her role in the 1987 film Straight to Hell. According to True, the pair were formally introduced at an L7 and Butthole Surfers concert in Los Angeles in May 1991. In the weeks that followed, after learning from Grohl that Cobain shared mutual interests with her, Love began pursuing Cobain. In late 1991, the two were often together, and bonded through drug use. On February 24, 1992, a few days after the conclusion of Nirvana's Pacific Rim tour, Cobain and Love were married on Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. Love wore a satin and lace dress once owned by Frances Farmer, and Cobain donned a Guatemalan purse and wore green pajamas, because he had been too lazy to put on a tux. 8 people were in attendance at the ceremony, including Grohl. Love said she was warned by the Sonic Youth bassist Kim Gordon that marrying Cobain would destroy her life. Love responded, "Whatever. I love him. And I wanna be with him. It wasn't his fault. He wasn't trying to do that." The couple's daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, was born August 18, 1992. A sonogram was included in the artwork for Nirvana's single, Lithium. In a 1992 Vanity Fair article, Love admitted to a drug binge with Cobain in the early weeks of her pregnancy. At the time, she claimed that Vanity Fair had misquoted her. Love later admitted to using heroin before knowing she was pregnant. The couple were asked by the press if Frances was addicted to drugs at birth. The Los Angeles County Department of Children's Services visited the Cobains days after Love gave birth, and later took them to court, stating that their drug usage made them unfit parents. In October 1992, when asked, "Well, are you gay?" by Monk magazine, Cobain replied, "If I wasn't attracted to Courtney, I'd be a bisexual." In another interview, he described identifying with the gay community in The Advocate, stating, "I'm definitely gay in spirit, and I probably could be bisexual, and if I wouldn't have found Courtney, I probably would have carried on with a bisexual lifestyle," but also that he was more sexually attracted to women. He described himself as being feminine in childhood, and often wore dresses, and other stereotypically feminine clothing. Some of his song lyrics, as well as phrases he would use to vandalize vehicles and a bank, included "God is gay," "Jesus is gay," "homosexual sex rules," and "everyone is gay." One of his personal journals states, "I am not gay, although I wish I were, just to piss off homophobes." Cobain advocated for LGBTQ+ rights, including traveling to Oregon to perform at a benefit opposing the 1992 Oregon ballot Measure 9, and supported local bands with LGBTQ+ members. He reported having felt different from the age of 7, and was a frequent target of homophobic bullying in his school due to his having a gay friend. Cobain was interviewed by 2 gay magazines, Out and The Advocate, the 1993 interview with The Advocate being described as the only interview the band's lead singer says he plans to do for Incesticide, an album whose liner notes included a statement decrying homophobia, racism, and misogyny. "If any of you in any way hate homosexuals, people of different color, or women, please do this one favor for us. Leave us the fuck alone. Don't come to our shows, and don't buy our records." Throughout most of his life, Cobain suffered from chronic bronchitis, and intense physical pain due to an undiagnosed chronic stomach condition. According to The Telegraph, Cobain had depression. His cousin brought attention to the family history of suicide, mental illness, and alcoholism, noting that 2 of her uncles had died by suicide with guns. He used drugs heavily. His first drug experience was with cannabis in 1980, at age 13. He regularly used the drug during adulthood. Cobain also had a period of consuming notable amounts of LSD, as observed by Miranda, and was prone to alcoholism and solvent abuse. Novoselic said he was really into getting fucked up, drugs, acid, any kind of drug. Cobain first took heroin in 1986, administered to him by a dealer in Tacoma, Washington, who had previously supplied him with oxycodone and aspirin. Cobain used heroin sporadically for several years. By the end of 1990, his use had developed into addiction. Cobain claimed that he was determined to get a habit as a way to self-medicate his stomach condition. "It started with 3 days in a row of doing heroin, and I don't have a stomach pain. That was such a relief," he said. However, his longtime friend Buzz Osborne disputes this, saying that his stomach pain was more likely caused by his heroin use. "He made it up for sympathy, and so he could use it as an excuse to stay loaded. Of course he was vomiting. That's what people on heroin do, they vomit. It's called vomiting with a smile on your face. Cobain's heroin use began to affect Nirvana's Nevermind tour. During a 1992 photoshoot with Michael Levine, he fell asleep several times, having used heroin beforehand. Cobain told biographer Michael Azerrad, "They're not going to be able to tell me to stop. So I really didn't care. Obviously to them it was like practicing witchcraft or something. They didn't know anything about it, so they thought that any second, I was going to die." The morning after the band's performance on Saturday Night Live in 1992, Cobain experienced his first near-death overdose after injecting heroin. Love resuscitated him. Prior to a performance at the New Music Seminar in New York City on July 23, 1993, Cobain suffered another overdose. Rather than calling for an ambulance, Love injected Cobain with naloxone to resuscitate him. Cobain proceeded to perform with Nirvana, giving the public no indication that anything had happened. Following a tour stop at Terminal 1 in Munich, Germany, on March 1, 1994, Cobain was diagnosed with bronchitis and severe laryngitis. He flew to Rome the next day for medical treatment, and was joined there by his wife, Courtney Love, on March 3, 1994. The next morning, Love awoke to find that Cobain had overdosed on a combination of champagne and Rohypnol. Cobain was rushed to the hospital, and was unconscious for the rest of the day. After 5 days, Cobain was released, and returned to Seattle. Love later said that the incident was Cobain's first suicide attempt. On March 18, 1994, Love phoned the Seattle police informing them that Cobain was suicidal, and had locked himself in a room with a gun. Police arrived, and confiscated several guns, and a bottle of pills from Cobain, who insisted that he was not suicidal, and had locked himself in the room to hide from Love. Love arranged an intervention regarding Cobain's drug use on March 25, 1994. The 10 people involved included musician friends, record company executives, and one of Cobain's closest friends, Dylan Carlson. Cobain reacted with anger, insulting, and heaping scorn on the participants, and locked himself in the upstairs bedroom. However, by the end of the day, Cobain agreed to undergo a detox program. Cobain arrived at the Exodus Recovery Center in Los Angeles on March 30, 1994. Staff members were unaware of Cobain's history of depression and suicide attempts. When he was visited by friends, they saw no indication that Cobain was in a negative state of mind. He spent the day talking to counselors about his drug abuse and personal problems, happily playing with his daughter Frances. These interactions were the last time Cobain saw his daughter. The following night, Cobain walked outside to have a cigarette, and climbed over a 6-foot-high fence to leave the facility, which he had joked earlier in the day would be a stupid feat to attempt. He took a taxi to Los Angeles Airport, and flew back to Seattle. On the flight, he sat near Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses. Despite Cobain's animosity towards Guns N' Roses, Cobain seemed happy to see McKagan. McKagan later said that he knew from all of my instincts that something was wrong. Most of Cobain's friends and family were unaware of his whereabouts. On April 2 and 3, Cobain was spotted in numerous locations around Seattle. On April 3, Love hired private investigator Tom Grant to find Cobain. Cobain was not seen the next day. On April 7, amid rumors of Nirvana breaking up, the band pulled out of the 1994 Lollapalooza festival. On April 8, Cobain's body was discovered at his Lake Washington Boulevard home by electrician Gary Smith, who had arrived to install a security system. Apart from a small amount of blood coming out of Cobain's ear, the electrician reported no visible signs of trauma, and initially believed that Cobain was asleep until he saw the shotgun pointing at his chin. A suicide note was found, addressed to Cobain's childhood imaginary friend Boda, that stated that Cobain had not felt the excitement of listening to as well as creating music, along with really writing, for too many years now. A high concentration of heroin and traces of diazepam were also found in his body. Although conductor David Woodard had built a dream machine for Cobain, reports that Cobain had been using the device excessively in the days leading up to his suicide were contradicted by later findings. Cobain's body had been there for days. The coroner's report estimated he died on April 5, 1994, at the age of 27. A public vigil was held on April 10, 1994, at a park at Seattle Center, drawing approximately 7,000 mourners. Pre-recorded messages by Novoselic and Love were played at the memorial. Love read portions of the suicide note to the crowd, crying and chastising Cobain. Near the end of the vigil, Love distributed some of Cobain's clothing to those who remained. Grohl said that the news of Cobain's death was probably the worst thing that has happened to me in my life. I remember the day after that I woke up, and I was heartbroken that he was gone. I just felt like, okay, so I get to wake up today, and have another day, and he doesn't. Billboard, reporting from Seattle on April 23, 1994, stated that within a few hours of Cobain's death being confirmed on April 8, the only remaining Nirvana titles at Park Avenue Records on Queen Anne Street were 2 heart-shaped box import CD singles. A marketing director at the 3-store Cellophane Square chain said that all 3 stores sold about a few hundred CDs, singles, and vinyl by the morning of April 9. A buyer at Tower Records on Mercer Street said, "It's a pathetic scene, everything is going out the door. If people were really fans, they would have had this stuff already." In the United Kingdom, sales of Nirvana releases rose dramatically immediately after Cobain's death. Grohl believed that he knew Cobain would die at an early age, saying that sometimes you just can't save someone from themselves, and in some ways, you kind of prepare yourself emotionally for that to be a reality. Dave Reed, who for a short time had been Cobain's foster father, said that he had the desperation, not the courage, to be himself. Once you do that, you can't go wrong, because you can't make any mistakes when people love you for being yourself. But for Kurt, it didn't matter that other people loved him, he simply didn't love himself enough. A final ceremony was arranged by Cobain's mother on May 31, 1999, and was attended by Love and Tracy Morander. As a Buddhist monk chanted, "Daughter Frances Bean," scattered Cobain's ashes into McLean Creek in Olympia, the city where he had found his true artistic muse. In 2006, Love said she retained Cobain's ashes, kept in a bank vault in Los Angeles because no cemetery in Seattle will take them. Cobain's death became a topic of public fascination and debate. His artistic endeavors, and struggles with addiction, illness, and depression, as well as the circumstances of his death, have become a frequent topic of controversy. According to a spokesperson for the Seattle Police Department, the department receives at least one weekly request to reopen the investigation, resulting in the maintenance of the basic incident report on file. In March 2014, the Seattle Police developed 4 rolls of film that had been left in an evidence vault. No reason was provided for why the rolls were not developed earlier. According to the Seattle Police, the 35mm film photographs show the scene of Cobain's dead body more clearly than previous Polaroid images taken by the police. Detective Mike Kinski, a cold case investigator, was instructed to look at the film because it is 20 years later, and it's a high media case. Kinski stated that Cobain's death remains a suicide, and that the images would not have been released publicly. The photos in question were later released, one by one, weeks before the 20th anniversary of Cobain's death. One photo shows Cobain's arm, still wearing the hospital bracelet from the drug rehab facility he had left just a few days prior to returning to Seattle. Another photo shows Cobain's foot resting next to a bag of shotgun shells, one of which was used in his death. Cobain is remembered as one of the most influential rock musicians in the history of alternative music. His angst-fueled songwriting and anti-establishment persona led him to be referenced as the spokesman of Generation X. In addition, Cobain's songs widened the themes of mainstream rock music of the 1980s to discussion of personal reflection and social issues. On April 10, 2014, Nirvana was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Grohl, Novoselic, and Love accepted the accolade at the ceremony, where Cobain was also remembered. Cobain is one of the best-known members of the 27 Club, a list of musicians who died when they were 27 years old. Music and media reporting on April 23, 1994, after Cobain had died, stated that Jürgen Larsson, the president of MCA Music Entertainment International, was asked where he thought Cobain stood in terms of his contribution to contemporary music, and Larsson replied that if anybody comes out of nowhere to sell 11 or 12 million albums, you have to conclude that there's something there. He wasn't just a one-hit wonder. According to music journalist Paul Lester, who worked at Melody Maker at the time, Cobain's suicide triggered an immediate reappraisal of his work. He wrote, "The general impression offered by In Utero was that Cobain was some kind of whiny, self-absorbed, grunge, misery guts who could make routinely powerful music but was hardly a suffering godhead." You could almost hear a collective sigh of relief after April 5, 1994, that Cobain could no longer further sully his reputation, that the myth-making machinery could finally be cranked into action. Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins referred to Cobain as the Michael Jordan of our generation, and said that Cobain opened the door for everyone in the 1990s alternative rock scene. Lars Ulrich of Metallica reflected on Cobain's influence, stating that with Kurt Cobain you felt you were connecting to the real person, not to a perception of who he was. You were not connecting to an image or a manufactured cutout. You felt that between you and him there was nothing. It was heart to heart. There are very few people who have that ability. In 1996, the Church of Kurt Cobain was established in Portland, Oregon, but it was later claimed by some media outlets to have been a media hoax. Reflecting on Cobain's death over 10 years later, MSNBC's Eric Olson wrote, "In the intervening decade, Cobain, a small, frail but handsome man in life, has become an abstract Generation X icon, viewed by many as the last real rock star, a messiah, and martyr whose every utterance has been plundered and parsed." In 2003, David Fricke of Rolling Stone ranked Cobain the 12th greatest guitarist of all time. He was later ranked the 73rd greatest guitarist, and 45th greatest singer of all time by the same magazine, and by MTV as 7th in the 22 greatest voices in music. In 2006, he was placed at number 20 by Hitparader on their list of the 100 greatest metal singers of all time. In 2005, a sign was put up in Aberdeen, Washington, that read "Welcome to Aberdeen. Come as you were" as a tribute to Cobain. The sign was paid for and created by the Kurt Cobain Memorial Committee, a non-profit organization created in May 2004 to honor Cobain. The committee planned to create a Kurt Cobain Memorial Park and a youth center in Aberdeen. Because Cobain was cremated, and his remains scattered into the Wishkah River in Washington, many Nirvana fans visit Breda Park, near Cobain's former Lake Washington home, to pay tribute. On the anniversary of his death, fans gather in the park to celebrate his life and memory. Controversy erupted in July 2009 when a monument to Cobain in Aberdeen along the Wishkah River included the quote, "Drugs are bad for you. They will fuck you up." The city ultimately decided to sandblast the monument to replace the expletive with F, but fans immediately drew the letters back in. In December 2013, the small city of Hoquiam, where Cobain once lived, announced that April 10th would become the annual Nirvana Day. Similarly, in January 2014, Cobain's birthday, February 20th, was declared annual Kurt Cobain Day in Aberdeen. In June 2020, the 1959 Martin D18E acoustic electric guitar used by Cobain for Nirvana's MTV Unplugged performance sold at auction for $6,010,000. It was the most expensive guitar, and the most expensive piece of band memorabilia ever sold. In April 2021, around the 27th anniversary of Cobain's death, American musician Kid Cudi, a fan of Cobain, performed his Man on the Moon 3, The Chosen album cuts Tequila Shots, and Sad People on Saturday Night Live, where he wore a green sweater, and later a dress in tribute to Cobain. In July 2021, the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation confirmed that Cobain's childhood home in Aberdeen as a historic landmark will be included on their heritage register, and that the owner of the property would be making it into an exhibit for people to visit. In May 2022, Cobain's Lake Placid blue Fender Mustang guitar sold at auction for $4.5 million to Jim Irsay, making it the most valuable electric guitar ever sold, and the second most valuable guitar overall. Only Cobain's Martin D18E acoustic electric guitar was more valuable when it sold for $6 million in 2020. Prior to Cobain's death, Michael Azerrad published Come As You Are, The Story of Nirvana, a book chronicling Nirvana's career from its beginning, as well as the personal histories of the band members. The book explored Cobain's drug addiction, as well as the countless controversies surrounding the band. After Cobain's death, Azerrad republished the book to include a final chapter discussing the last year of Cobain's life. The book involved the band members themselves, who provided interviews and personal information to Azerrad specifically for the book. In 2006, Azerrad's taped conversations with Cobain were transformed into a documentary about Cobain, titled Kurt Cobain, About a Son. Though this film does not feature any music by Nirvana, it has songs by the artists that inspired Cobain. Journalists Ian Halperin and Max Wallace published their investigation of any possible conspiracy surrounding Cobain's death in their 1999 book Who Killed Kurt Cobain? Halperin and Wallace argued that, while there was not enough evidence to prove a conspiracy, there was more than enough to demand that the case be reopened. The book included the journalists' discussions with Tom Grant, who had taped nearly every conversation that he had undertaken while he was in Love's employ. Over the next several years, Halperin and Wallace collaborated with Grant to write a second book, 2004's Love and Death, The Murder of Kurt Cobain. In 2001, writer Charles R. published a biography of Cobain, titled Heavier Than Heaven. For the book, Krist conducted over 400 interviews, and was given access by Courtney Love to Cobain's journals, lyrics, and diaries. Krist's biography was met with criticism, including allegations of accepting secondhand, and incorrect, information as fact. Friend Everett True, who derided the book as being inaccurate, omissive, and highly biased, said Heavier Than Heaven was the Courtney-sanctioned version of history, or, alternatively, Krist's "Oh, I think I need to find the new Bruce Springsteen now Kurt Cobain book." However, beyond the criticism, the book contained details about Cobain and Nirvana's career that would have otherwise been unnoted. In 2008, Krist published Cobain Unseen, a compilation of annotated photographs, and creations, and writings by Cobain throughout his life and career. In 2002, a sampling of Cobain's writings was published as journals. The book fills 280 pages with a simple black cover. The pages are arranged somewhat chronologically, although Cobain generally did not date them. The journal pages are reproduced in color, and there is a section added at the back with explanations and transcripts of some of the less legible pages. The writings begin in the late 1980s, and were continued until his death. A paperback version of the book, released in 2003, included a handful of writings that were not offered in the initial release. In the journals, Cobain talked about the ups and downs of life on the road, made lists of what music he was enjoying, and often scribbled down lyric ideas for future reference. Upon its release, reviewers and fans were conflicted about the collection. Many were elated to be able to learn more about Cobain, and read his inner thoughts in his own words, but were disturbed by what was viewed as an invasion of his privacy. In 2009, ECW Press released a book titled Grunge is Dead, The Oral History of Seattle Rock Music. Written by Greg Prato, the book explored the history of grunge in detail, touching upon Nirvana and Cobain's life and death via interviews with former bandmates, friends, and various grunge-era contemporaries. A picture of Cobain from the Bleach era is used for the book's front cover, and its title comes from a shirt that Cobain was once photographed wearing. Cobain was also apparently the biggest influence on the 2020 novel Dead Rock Stars, by the English author Guy Minkowski, particularly given Cobain's message of feminism. Of the musician, Minkowski said, "I think he raised the consciousness." In the 1998 documentary Kurt and Courtney, filmmaker Nick Broomfield investigated Tom Grant's claim that Cobain was actually murdered. He took a film crew to visit a number of people associated with Cobain, and Love's father, Cobain's aunt, and one of the couple's former nannies. Broomfield also spoke to mentors band lead heralded and LDJ Hoke, who claimed Love offered him $50,000 to kill Cobain. Although Hoke claimed he knew who killed Cobain, he failed to mention a name, and offered no evidence to support his assertion. Broomfield inadvertently captured Hoke's last interview, as he died days later, reportedly hit by a train. However, Broomfield felt he had not uncovered enough evidence to conclude the existence of a conspiracy. In a 1998 interview, Broomfield summed it up by saying, "I think that he committed suicide. I don't think there's a smoking gun. And I think there's only one way you can explain a lot of things around his death. Not that he was murdered, but that there was just a lack of caring for him. I just think that Courtney had moved on, and he was expendable." Broomfield's documentary was noted by the New York Times to be a rambling, largely speculative, and circumstantial work, relying on flimsy evidence, as was his later documentary Biggie and Tupac. Gus Van Sant loosely based his 2005 movie Last Days on the events in the final days of Cobain's life, starring Michael Pitt as the main character Blake, who was based on Cobain. In January 2007, Love began to shop the biography Heavier Than Heaven to various movie studios in Hollywood to turn the book into an A-list feature film about Cobain and Nirvana. A Brett Morgan film, entitled Kurt Cobain, Montage of Tech, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2015, followed by small screen and cinema releases. Morgan said that documentary will be this generation's The Wall. Soaked in Bleach is a 2015 American docudrama directed by Benjamin Statler. The film details the events leading up to the death of Kurt Cobain, as seen through the perspective of Tom Grant, the private detective who was hired by Courtney Love to find Cobain, her husband, shortly before his death in 1994. It also explores the premise that Cobain's death was not a suicide. The film stars Tyler Bryan as Cobain, and Daniel Roebuck as Grant, with Sarah Scott portraying Courtney Love, and August Emerson as Dylan Carlson. Love's legal team issued a cease and desist letter against theaters showing the documentary. Regarding the depiction of Nirvana, and in particular Kurt Cobain, the indie rock author Andrew Earls wrote, "Never has a rock band's past been so retroactively distorted into an irreversible fiction by incessant mythologizing, conjecture, wild speculation, and romanticizing rhetoric. The Cobain biographical narrative, specifically in regard to the culturally irresponsible mishandling of subjects such as drug abuse, depression, and suicide, is now impenetrable with inaccurate and overcooked connectivity between that which is completely unrelated, too chronologically disparate, or just plain untrue." Andrew Earls. Matt Reeves' film The Batman depicts a version of Bruce Wayne, performed by Robert Pattinson, that was loosely inspired by Cobain. Reeves stated, "When I write, I listen to music, and as I was writing the first act, I put on Nirvana's Something in the Way. That's when it came to me that, rather than make Bruce Wayne the playboy version we've seen before, there's another version who had gone through a great tragedy, and become a recluse. So I started making this connection to Gus Van Sant's last days, and the idea of this fictionalized version of Kurt Cobain being in this kind of decaying manner. Something in the Way was used in trailers to promote the Batman prior to its release, and is featured twice in the film." In September 2009, the Roy Smiles play Kurt and Sid debuted at the Trafalgar Studios in London's West End. The play, set in Cobain's greenhouse on the day of his suicide, revolves around the ghost of Sid Vicious visiting Cobain to try to convince him not to kill himself. Cobain was played by Sean Evans. Cobain was included as a playable character in the 2009 video game Guitar Hero 5. He can be used to play songs by Nirvana and other acts. Novoselic and Grohl released a statement condemning the inclusion, and urging the developer, Activision, to alter it, saying they had no control over the use of Cobain's likeness. Love denied that she had given permission, saying it was the result of a cabal of a few assholes' greed, and threatened to sue. The vice president of Activision said that Love had contributed photos and videos to the development, and had been great to work with. For a complete list of all Nirvana releases, see Nirvana discography.